Hi, this is Tize. Welcome to my beat making tutorial series. Today I will show you how to make a dance funk beat with a summer vibe. I will also show you the tools I use, the plugins I work with, and share some of my production tips. First, let's listen to a short teaser of how this beat will sound. The first part of this beat is the drums. The drum pattern is pretty simple. We have a kick, a snare, and hi-hats. Let's listen to the drum samples I'm using. This is the kick. I also added a second kick sample for layering. It adds more top end and makes the kick sound clearer. Next is the snare. I'm using 2 snare samples here. I layer them together to get a more interesting and fuller sound. I do the same with the hi-hats. I use a few hi-hat samples and layer them together. And this is how the drum pattern sounds in the end. I also added a clap sample from Splice. To make the drum pattern more interesting, I added some percussion elements. Shaker. And to accent the first beat of the bar, I added some chimes. Now the full drum pattern sounds like this. After the drums are ready, I usually move on to the chord progression. It's a great foundation to start a beat because the chords set the mood of the track. When you have a chord progression, it's much easier to add other elements on top, like bass or melodic parts. Of course, this is not the only right way to make a track. For the chord progression, I'm going to use one of my favorite plugins, Lounge Lizard. In my opinion, it has one of the most beautiful and interesting electric piano sounds. I'm also using a MIDI chord progression from my Platinum Touch MIDI pack. Let's listen to how the chord progression sounds. To give the electric piano a vintage sound, I'm using the RC20 plugin. After that, I use EQ to make some space for the bass. I also add a bit of high end to make the piano sound brighter. Now let's move on to the bass line. For the bass, I'm using a contact library called Rickenbacker bass. It's a great bass for styles like funk, disco, and more. When I write the bass line, I usually follow the root notes of the chords and add some syncopation. This gives the bass more groove. To keep the bass line interesting, I make small changes every 4 bars. This gives us an 8-bar bass line. The first 3 bars and bars 5 to 7 are the same, but bars 4 and 8 are different. Let's listen to how it sounds with the drums. Let's add an EQ to the bass. I cut a bit around 120 Hz to remove some muddiness and boost around 500 Hz to help the bass cut through the mix. I also use the R-Bass plugin from Waves to shape the tone of our bass. Now let's listen to the difference with and without the processing. One of the main things that separates professional tracks is the choice of good sounds and instruments. Before you add anything, it's important to know why you are adding it. High quality sounds save you a lot of extra work. This saves time and helps your track sound more clean and professional. For the guitar part in this track, I used a sample from Splice. I slightly modified it to fit the beat better. This is how it sounds. Now let's move on to guitar processing. First, I use an EQ to cut the low frequencies so the guitar doesn't clash with the bass. Next, I use the CLA Guitars plugin from Waves. It can replace a full effects chain and really improve the guitar sound. It includes all the essential effects you need for guitar processing. At the end, I add another EQ to fine-tune the guitar and help it sit better in the mix. As usual, I remove some mud and add a bit of mid-range for better clarity. And this is how it sounds in the mix. For the bells part, I'm using a contact library called Hybrid Keys. You can see the preset name here. With the bells, we support the chords, add a small melody on top, and bring a bit of sparkle to the beat. This is how it sounds with the chords. With an EQ, I cut the unnecessary low frequencies and slightly reduce everything above 4.5 kHz to push the bells a bit to the background. EQ is one of the main tools you can use to position sounds in the mix. After that, I add RC20 to give the sound a light vintage feel. Let's listen to how it sounds in the mix. For the pad, I decided to use an organ. I'm using Contact with the Hybrid Keys library. It's a simple part that adds depth and texture to the beat, with a light vintage feel. We EQ the organ, remove the unnecessary low frequencies, and slightly reduce everything above 6 kHz to push it to the background. Now we have an 8-bar loop. Let's first listen to how it sounds. Next, I'm going to turn it into a full beat by doing a quick arrangement. We'll start with an intro, then move into a verse and a chorus. After that, let's listen to the final version of the beat. That's it for this beat. If it was helpful, show some love to the channel. Thank you for watching and for your time. You can listen to the full beat via the link in the description. See you in the next video.